From the halls of Austin to the fights in D.C. that hit us at home, this is Politics with the Big Dogs.
Hello, hello, hello. This is Anthony Holm, host of Politics with the Big Dogs. Thank you again for joining us, and thank you for defending Texas. Today we're going to have in the studio Aaron Reitz. Aaron is one of 4 serious candidates running for Attorney General. They're all experienced. 3 of the 4 have already been elected. Aaron Reitz is the one who hasn't been elected, which is pretty unusual, running for the 3rd highest ranking office in the state. Aaron's background is a Marine, served overseas, went to UT Law, worked for Attorney General Paxton for some years at a senior level, advancing some of the most politically sensitive litigation. Then went and was chief of staff to Senator Cruz, another strong conservative, and most recently was appointed by President Trump to head the policy office of the Department of Justice. And as I understand that is leading and guiding the DOJ as to where it should go in making sure that the values align with the president. So it's a pretty big deal. It is a big deal, and Aaron Reitz is a big deal. So he's joining us in the show shortly, but what is striking to me is here is a younger fella who's never been elected and is a very credible and very serious candidate to be the next Attorney General of Texas. That's a huge job. 2 of the 3 other candidates are Texas state senators. Obviously, both are attorneys by training, one of whom has been a judge and a prosecutor, and then the 4th candidate is a sitting U.S. House member, also with a pretty substantial background. But all 3 of them have constituencies at least the size of the U.S. House, if not larger. The 2 state Senate districts are larger. And here is seemingly kind of a Ted Cruz-style upstart out of nowhere, it seems, Aaron Reitz. And he's a very serious candidate and very interesting guy, and he's out on the trail. You probably heard of him and heard from him, in fact. So we're going to have him here in the studio shortly. Then we're also going to do a serious look at what's happening in Iran. The protesters, the oppressive radical Muslim government who killed thousands of them, President Trump's statements that you better not start shooting those protesters or we're going to shoot you, and what that means for U.S., what that means for the U.S. diplomacy, what that means for the U.S. Authority in the world, and how the Islamification of Texas is impacting our lives. So hold on tight. We're going to have Aaron join us here in just a minute. Again, this is Anthony Holm. You're listening to Politics with the Big Dogs. Make sure you go to our website, politicswithbigdogs.com, sign up for the newsletter, join some of the petitions. Let's ban taxpayer-funded lobbying. And make sure you're joining us and following us on Instagram and Facebook, and subscribe to our YouTube channel, politicswithbigdogs.com. We have all of the shows hosted there. In the studio today, we have Aaron Reitz.
Yeah. Hey, Anthony, thanks so much for having me. Yeah, look, I'm running for Texas Attorney General. And the reason why I'm running is because I think we're in a battle for the soul of our state and our nation. And I know from long fought personal experience that the primary arena in which we're fighting the left right now is the justice system. One of my proudest chapters fighting, I remember you and I had a time together where we worked together. You were at the AG's office for a little while. That's where you and I first met back in 2020, I think it was. And since that time, I was Paxton's deputy. I was then Ted Cruz's chief, and most recently served as the presidentially appointed Senate-confirmed head of the Office of Legal Policy at DOJ. And I think your summary of that role was accurate. My job was to partner with Attorney General Bondi to effectuate the president's executive orders that had to do with the Justice Department or had sort of law and order implications. And so after doing that for a season in early 2025, Paxton announced for AG, and it became clear that we needed somebody, and I say we, I think the president understood this, the attorney general of the U.S. understood this, Paxton understood this, that as we transition away from Paxton as our AG, as he runs for Senate, that we have to have strength and continuity into our next AG, somebody who doesn't need training wheels or on-the-job training, somebody who's aligned with President Trump, who's already been vetted, tested, trusted, and selected, who can really advance the America First law and order agenda in Texas. And that's what we're doing. I'm on the campaign trail constantly. I'm talking to you right now from Harris County in Houston, and we're just crushing it all the way through the finish line, having a great run.
Well, thank you for joining us. And folks, you heard from Attorney General Paxton on Saturday. And I, again, want to remind you, I know most of the people who come on. I've worked with many of them directly or indirectly, certainly Attorney General Paxton. And Aaron and I overlapped for some period. I think it was a short period, but nonetheless, I've known Aaron for 5 years or so and circulated in the same circles. And frankly, I think I know all of the other candidates running against you as well, and have circulated with them in their circles and worked directly or indirectly with them as well. So again, full disclosure, folks, I know Aaron just like I know all of the other three candidates. So one thing that I appreciate about you that I very rarely see, David Glasheen had this and just a handful of others. I see a lot of people running for office who haven't served in the military. And I think if you'll give me a moment, right? I grew up in rural Iowa where it's poor. There's no opportunity. All of my people, rather, I didn't serve, but my father, my grandparents, all my cousins, it was the way out. It was the military service. And now that I've gotten enmeshed in politics the last 25 years, almost always people come from a pretty blessed upbringing and they tend not to serve. You, however, were a Marine. I was about to say were. Actually, that's incorrect. Once a Marine, always a Marine, and I appreciate that about you. I honor you for that. Very few in our circles have served. So tell us a little bit about that as well, please, and why.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I came from a normal middle class family. I didn't come from any particular privilege or anything. Didn't grow up too poor, not too wealthy, in the suburbs of San Antonio. And I will tell you, even though, your listeners can't quite see me right now, and I have a much older hairstyle, we'll say, folks can look up a picture of me. I'm fairly young. So 9/11 actually happened when I was a freshman in high school, and that set me on a trajectory. I actually come from no military family. I didn't know, really the differences between the services. Nobody pushed me in that direction. But as a young man, 9/11 happened, and I felt like I'd be missing something if I didn't go. It just felt like, okay, this is something that a young man ought to do when we're attacked like this. And, I was a true believer in the doctrine back then. Hey, if we don't get the bad guys over there, they're going to come over here. And I can't wait. I was champing at the bit to go to Iraq or Afghanistan. Ended up going to Texas A&M on a Marine Corps ROTC scholarship, commissioned as an officer, went to Afghanistan. I was deployed to the northern Helmand province, sort of the far northern region of where the Marines primarily were, in South Afghanistan. And actually, it was during that time that while I was away that my son was born, my oldest. We've got 4 kids now, my wife and I. And I met my son when he was 4 or 5 months old. And that's kind of when I knew, hey, some guys, God calls some guys to serve for 20 to 30 years. He calls other guys to serve during a season, and then they, move on to the next thing. And so, went to law school after my 5 years on active duty, had a great time in the Marines, still in the reserve. And so, yes, it's true that, once a Marine, always a Marine, but I'm actually still serving in the Marine Corps Reserve as a major. And I think it's a tremendously important part of who I am and my sense of duty. I always tell the story on the campaign trail that the very first time I swore an oath to the Constitution was as a brand new second lieutenant. And I raised my right hand and I said, I, Aaron Reitz, do solemnly swear to support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And back then, I primarily thought about the foreign enemies. And yes, we have many, many foreign enemies. Now, the next time I swore that oath was in the West Wing with Attorney General Bondi on my right, my wife and 4 kids on my left. And I actually said the exact same oath, word for word, right? One time in uniform with, rank on my collar, and the next time in a suit and a tie, surrounded by sort of, the ivory tower of the Justice Department and the White House and so forth. And I came to realize that, in my view, even though, yes, we have many, many foreign enemies to our Constitution, I think the real justice crisis that we're living in right now is one in which we're primarily dealing with domestic enemies of the Constitution. These are people who really hate our way of life. They don't care about the text or the spirit of the Constitution. They'll eviscerate it when they can to advance their far left agenda. And I find that to be unacceptable. That's not why me or my buddies went to Afghanistan. It's not why our great grandparents went to World War II. It's not why we served, right? We served to defend and advance the home front and our American values, our constitutional values, and those are under assault in the justice system. And we need an attorney general who is going to fight with the same ferocity as a Marine to advance and defend those values. And so that's a huge reason why I'm in. I'm proud of my service. I'm the only guy that has served in the military in this race for AG. And what's interesting, Anthony, is even though Texas has the second largest veteran population in the country, second only to California, just because of the number of bases and the population there,
Sure.
we actually have no statewide elected official in Texas who has been in the military. And I think that that's kind of crazy, actually. Like, do you just think about how patriotic we are, how military friendly we are, the number of bases, military operations, how important Texas is to our sort of national security footprint. I think one of the advantages that I bring as a soon to be statewide elected official is, hey, our, brothers in arms who have served or actively serving or did serve have a statewide elected official who has a life experience like they do. So it's all hugely important, I think, and I'm proud of that service.
That is striking. We have at least 30 or so elected officials between the courts and everybody else, and none of them have served. Particularly as a party, but particularly in the Republican primary, they're going out and talking about the values of our country, which are embedded largely in military tradition, yet none of them is. It kind of goes to my opening. One of the things that's striking to me about you is your service, much like a few other people that I've had on the show or interfaced with who didn't have to, right? Like my people, kind of that's the only way out. But lots of folks stepped up who didn't have to. I had a similar experience around 9/11 and almost went in, though I'm much older than you, at the kind of the twilight of my opportunity to enter. Look, there's so much for us to talk about. One of the things that strikes me is you're the only one running for AG who hasn't been elected to office. And the other three have been elected to big offices. Offices. And yet, as I read the fundraising reports that were released, I think it was, the 6-month report from second half of last year, you outraised all of them. Now two of them, one gave himself a big old loan and one transferred money from his account.
Sure.
But on terms of just raising dollars, you outraised all of them. And that was so striking. They're all three currently in office. And here's a guy really who kind of popped up out of nowhere, almost in the Ted Cruz mold, like nobody's heard of him, nobody has any idea about him, and I went in too. So tell us about that. I mean, it's a pretty bold move. What?
Yeah. Look, we're very proud of our fundraising numbers. Maybe there's other prior candidates or elected officials that are looking at or listening to us right now or have been in politics. It's like, when that fundraising deadline comes up, right, you file it, and then you and your whole team are really like staying up until 2 or 3 in the morning, and you're calculating your own numbers, and you're looking at your opponents, and you're looking at relative strength, and you're looking at raw dollars, number of donors. And I tell you what, Anthony, by like 2 in the morning or so, when we got done really analyzing, obviously we submitted on time and we're good with our paperwork, but as we were analyzing not just my numbers, in isolation, but relative to my opponents, we ended up kind of being, we knew that we were doing well, but we not only outraised all 3 of my opponents, but we did so by orders of magnitude. I outraised one of my opponents 4x. I announced another one of my opponents 3x, and I outraised one of my third and final opponent nearly 2x. But on top of all that, I outraised by the number of individual donors by double combined of my opponents. In other words, if you add up opponent 1, 2, and 3, their number of contributors, add them up, double it, I have more individual contributions than that, right? So we're raising more cash, and we have way more participation from the grassroots against a cross-cut of all kinds of donors. What does this mean? It means that I think that the grassroots are looking at this office. They're thinking about it seriously. They know that Paxton has served our state very effectively, zealously, faithfully, and they want somebody who is a real battle-tested warrior, ready to go. I'm proud to have Paxton's endorsement to succeed him. I'm proud to have served in the Trump administration in the senior ranks of the Justice Department. That resonates with people. Grassroots and donors alike, small dollar, mid dollar, large dollar, are rallying to this flag. And you're right, Anthony, like for those who have not had to go raise money to go from $0. I'm not independently wealthy. I didn't come from a wealthy family. I didn't inject my campaign either with a bunch of personal funds, nor did I have a campaign account to like roll over that I had, raised from a prior office or prior title. I started from $0 and scratched my way all the way up to nearly $4 million in 6 months. And I retained nearly $3 million of that cash on hand, which is plenty of gas in the tank for us to be extremely successful over the next 4 to 6 weeks when early voting starts. So,
folks, this is Anthony Holm, host of Politics with the Big Dogs. If you're just joining us, we have Aaron Reitz, who is a candidate for Attorney General. There are 3 other candidates in the race. Aaron has worked for Attorney General Paxton, Chief of Staff for Ted Cruz, and most recently for Donald Trump as his lead policy advisor in the Department of Justice. And we are talking about why the Attorney General's office is so important and the issues that one has to look ahead on. So thank you. Oh, and most importantly, a Marine still serving. And I need to praise your wife because you were in the Middle East fighting terrorists when your first child was born. You met him when he was 4 or 5 months old. She too is serving. We should never forget that. She too is serving. All right, so tell us about the issues dominating this race and why they're important.
Yeah, look, I think that what people want on the ground, right, and we've been blitzing the state. I mean, we are absolutely out campaigning. I don't know how you measure that, number of stops, number of miles, whatever it may be. But if you just sort of follow each of the 4 candidates on social media, I guarantee you that we are hitting campaign stops, visiting with the grassroots voters, earning support in every corner of the state more aggressively than I think you could possibly imagine. And it's why we have such tremendous momentum. What I experience on the ground, what voters want, what Texas Republican primary voters want, is an attorney general who not only is ready to go to war, who understands that we are actually at war with the forces of the left in the justice system, but somebody who can really partner with President Trump to advance the America First law and order agenda. And that's really the theme of my campaign. As Attorney General, my goal is to advance the America First law and order agenda here in Texas. And you need somebody. Remember, this is the AG. It's a 4-year term. The first 2 years of my term, we're going to have Trump in office. In the middle of my 4-year term, there is a presidential election, which the Democrats, of course, will try to steal, and we've got to be vigilant on that. If the power shifts, God forbid, to a Democrat, it's total war again, just like I did with Paxton during the Biden administration. If it's a Republican, which we all pray that it will be, then we have another 4-year ally in the White House, and we can worry about what's happening within our borders a little bit more closely. But it's that America First law and order agenda that manifests itself in specific issues that Texas and Texans care about. Number one, it's dealing with the Islamification issue. Folks are very, very concerned about the creep of radicals who are unassimilated, unassimilable, have no interest in adopting the American way of life or our values or our traditions. And they are very much wanting to turn Texas into something that it's not.
Okay, Aaron, I want to interrupt here. So the Islamification of Texas, which I, too, am very, very troubled by. One of my first memories being older than you is Iran overtaking the U.S. Embassy and us not lighting the Christmas tree in the White House grounds. What can the Attorney General of Texas do to stop the invasion of radical Muslims into Texas who are building mosques all over and very aggressively recruiting people into Texas? We are trying to not just protect their religious rights, but usurp Christian values and rights to protect them. Can we outlaw burqas? I mean, what are we talking about? What can the AG do?
Yeah, the AG can do a lot in this regard. Look, the radical Muslims who have very much their sort of Sharia agenda in Texas, what they do in order to advance their agenda is they utilize a very well-funded, sophisticated, advanced, far-reaching network of C3s, C4s, nonprofits, PACs, corporate entities, elected officials, law firms, and this sort of network, right? We often talk about it in terms of like, I want folks to imagine the Soros network. How is it that George Soros and his radical sort of left-wing communist Marxist agenda is on the march? Well, because he launders his money and his people, his henchmen, through a sophisticated, vast network of nonprofits, super PACs, election committees, corporations, and so on and so forth. It becomes like a money laundering operation to get their people in the right place. Well, the Muslims in Texas are doing the exact same thing, right? They've got C3s and C4s that they've named innocuous names in order to avoid scrutiny. I'll give you an example of what Ken Paxton is doing right now to help with this, right? Remember, Epic City, the corporate entity that created Epic City is called Capital Community Partners, right? Think about, you want to talk about like an innocuously named corporate entity. How many times have you and I looked at like financial statements with the Secretary of State and it's like, oh, okay, there's an entity called Capital Community Partners. That's great. It sounds like an investment vehicle, like nothing to see here.
And folks, for those of you who don't know Epic City, it's a several hundred acre community, a Muslim-based community with schools, it's wholly incorporated. It's outside of Plano, of all places. Go figure. Right. Jeff Leach letting it just pop up right beside him.
Yeah,
and it's problematic. I'm really troubled by what type of dress codes are they going to have in that community? What are they going to do in their schools in that community? And why are we allowing people from different cultures to move here who don't want to embrace our values? Right? It's okay if you. Totally. I happen to be Christian and I'm open to other faiths and religions, but not unless we have a community of shared values. And that's very troubling.
Yeah, look, the ongoing prosperity of our American republic is dependent completely upon a set of common beliefs, shared values, shared language, shared views about the world, shared philosophies, and in many ways, shared faith. Our founders were very explicit about this. And yes, we welcome assimilable, Western, patriot, an American-loving people. Look, to be very clear, I think that we need a total immigration moratorium, legal and illegal, for at least a generation or two because of the influx of third worlders that we've had over the past 70 years. I mean, we've got to course correct big time. But my point is more at a higher level is like, but we can't sustain. A free republic cannot be maintained when you have a balkanizing effect of unassimilable folks from utterly foreign, non-Western nations. It becomes impossible. And then you get a powder keg where when the light, a match gets lit and then you're just looking at an explosion. You see this in overly diverse regimes all over the world throughout human history, and we've got to assimilate these people. But look, the AG right now is actually actively litigating against Capital Community Partners, the corporate entity created by Epic City, on securities fraud. I always say this, Anthony, I am going to treat, and the Attorney General has been treating, the sort of Islamification network in Texas like the feds treated the mob in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. How many mob bosses did we put away behind bars for murder? Not many. Why? Because they're sophisticated. They wiped their fingerprints off the weapon. But what they did do very successfully is they suffocated their operations through prosecuting and investigating process crimes, financial crimes, money laundering, RICO, racketeering, sex trafficking, drug trafficking, all these sorts of things, to where it became impossible for the mafia to even operate, and where it's been whittled down to almost irrelevance now in America. I think that's a good thing, and I think I want to see the same thing in Texas with the Islamification. That's a huge thing that the grassroots care about with the America First Law and Order agenda, but it's other things too. We've got to absolutely crack down on these big blue cities and these big blue counties that are destroying Texas from within. If Texas ever becomes not Texas, it will almost assuredly not be because of the direct action of our statewide elected officials, although too many of them are negligent and asleep at the wheel. I can blame them for their negligence.
They do all talk a good game and then just watch. It's so Republican. The debt is outrageous. Property taxes are outrageous, and they don't do anything about it. When we had General Paxton on last week, he said, I finally got the authority to prosecute election crime. I finally got the authority to prosecute adults trying to transgender children. Number one, it was shocking to me, and I'm sure the listeners, and again, this is a good time. It's Anthony Holm, host of Politics with the Big Dogs. We have Aaron Reitz on, a candidate for Attorney General, formerly with Attorney General Paxton, Chief of Staff to Cruz, Donald Trump appointee in Justice Department, a Marine. He's back here running for AG on a continuation of Paxton's mantra. And two of the things that struck me was the Attorney General didn't have the right to prosecute voting crime, election fraud in Texas until basically General Paxton's political team took out the Court of Appeals, best I can tell.
Totally, yes.
And then it was legal for adults to brainwash children into gender modification, that the famous one being the mom. Monsters don't go after little girls. They only go after boys. Don't you think you're a girl? Don't you want to be safe from the monsters? So you have an opportunity to continue that. And, in fact, that office just got many of these powers. How do you envision it?
Yeah, look, so you and I remember back in, I joined Paxton in 2020, and I served under him as his deputy until 23. And during the 2020 cycle, one of the divisions I oversaw was the Election Integrity Division, and we had the full suite of powers to prosecute criminally violations of the Texas Election Code. I didn't have those same powers in the cycle of 2022. Why? Because in the summer of 2021, the Court of Criminal Appeals, which is the highest criminal court in contrast with the Texas Supreme Court, stripped the AG of all those powers. And the legislature sat on its feet for several years until the regular session of 2025, when it finally reinstated those long-standing powers. They had every opportunity to do it in 2023, but they didn't do it in 2023 because Paxton was still in office. And if our legislature is known for anything, it is punitively treating Ken Paxton because they just hate him. They don't like him. This is why they impeached him. This is why all three of my opponents in different capacities have been deeply anti-Paxton, financially, politically, and through backdoor scheming. And so the legislature waited until Paxton announced that he would not be the AG anymore before they took action on reinstating those powers with the AG's office. Isn't that extraordinary? They wanted those powers for themselves, but they weren't going to give them to Paxton. Blessedly, they are back, and as AG, I now have the full suite, the full armory of tools and weapons at my disposal in order to ensure that our elections are secure and our ballot boxes are secure. This is going to be massively important, especially in the middle of my term, as I mentioned earlier in our segment together. There's going to be a presidential election right in the middle of my term as AG. And the Democrats are absolutely going to try to exploit the big blue areas in our state, particularly Harris County, Bexar County, Dallas County, Travis County, and down in the Valley. They are going to use the same old tricks in the book that they've been hiding up their sleeve. And you need an AG who is capable, confident, and comfortable with those weapons to go to war against the election fraudsters. And in this race, I'm the only one with that experience.
And folks, if you're just joining us, this is Anthony Holm, Politics with the Big Dogs. We're talking to Aaron Reitz, Aaron Reitz, candidate for Attorney General. And I want to pick up on something because we had AG Paxton in last week. We have you this week. You guys are saying two of the same things. My observation is the Texas legislature talks a good game, but they don't want people who will really go to war. And Paxton had the willingness to go to war. For better or for worse, all the things about him, he went to war on conservative issues. And the legislature goes out during campaign season and talks about doing these things, but then they try to restrict it. Then they all go to Austin, it's really not true. It also was exposed that TLR was deeply enmeshed in the effort, the largest lobbying effort. Like, there has been an anti-Ken Paxton sentiment, and now this group ART is jumping into the fold, which is run in part by Dan Branch, the guy that the establishment wanted, who Paxton beat 12 years ago. Right. So this effort has been a thread all the way through to restrict conservative outcomes, to talk a good game. And on this show, you listeners, you'll remember, I started praising Abbott lately because the last couple of years he's gotten much more conservative. I think it's probably because of Don Huffline's challenge to him. He hadn't traditionally been. So I know we have to wrap up and you have to go to your next event. What are your parting thoughts to Texans about you, about the future of Texas, and what you'd like them to hear?
Yeah, well, first, let me just agree with you. Yes, there is a deep anti-Paxton strain right now, and they have had to sort of sit in the corner and weep and gnash their teeth for so many years because Paxton's just been so beloved by the grassroots. He's been so dominant on the national scale. They can't stop him. They tried to take him out many, many times. All three of my opponents in this race either funded those efforts politically or financially, and now those same forces that have been lurking in the corners are hoping to undo all that Paxton has done over the past several years. It's why you see the establishment, the current crop of elected officials, none of them are cheering me on to be the next AG because they want a little plaything that they can control. They want their friend to be the next AG. For me, I'm coming from the outside. I'm the political outsider here. They don't know me. They can't control me. I don't owe them any political favors. They don't owe me any political favors. But I'm not playing by those rules. Neither has Paxton, and that's why he's been so immensely successful. It's also why he's been so hated by the swamp and by the establishment. So I'll leave people with this thought. You know, we have not had to elect in an open primary an attorney general in over a decade, right? You mentioned Dan Branch and Barry Smitherman, and that last time we had to deal with this was back in 2012, 2013, 2014 during the 14 cycle, right? And we haven't had to choose in an open primary our chief legal officer. And so one of the things that I always mention to people, especially to a sophisticated audience that's listening to us and to your program right now, is to remember that under Article 4, Section 22, it defines the job. It says, quote, "The Attorney General shall represent the state of Texas in all courts and pleas." That's the constitutional definition of this job. This is a legal, law enforcement, executive branch job. It is not a legislative job. And so while my opponents are out there talking about, oh, I worked on this bill, I did that amendment, I voted yes on this, I voted no on that, that's great. I like good legislation. I'm happy when we get good bills, up in the law books. I love when the governor signs good conservative pieces of legislation. But at the end of the day, the end of the legislative process is the beginning of the attorney general's process. If someone is running for AG touting their legislative record, voters should ask them, are you running for re-election to the legislature? Because if you are, thank you for telling me about your legislative accomplishments. But what they can't tell you, because they don't have a record, is what is your legal record? You're applying to be the state's lawyer. What is your legal record? Now, for me, I'm running on my long record, litigating, investigating, suing, defending, and appealing on all of the major issues that Texans care about, from election integrity to border security to the Islamification issue to the LGBT radical agenda to energy independence to environmental regulations to small business, pro-life, pro-family issues, pro-faith. You name the issues. And I have advanced our values and the Constitution in court, up and down the chain of the justice system. It's what sets me apart from all of my opponents, and it's what can give voters total confidence that as we transition away from Paxton and on to the next attorney general, we are not only not going to miss a beat, we're not going to stumble or skip, but we are going to keep our foot on the gas to continue aggressively, effectively, zealously advancing our values in the justice system. And that's what I offer people as the next attorney general of Texas.
Aaron Reitz, thank you so much for joining us today, and good luck and Godspeed.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate the time.
All right, folks. Anthony Holm, Politics with the Big Dogs. Thank you so much for joining us. We just heard from Aaron Reitz, a candidate for Texas Attorney General, and there's so much interesting about this race, in particular Aaron's candidacy. Primarily, we virtually never see somebody jump up for a statewide office who has no base, or who is not independently wealthy. Well, you just don't see it. It's fascinating to me. The last one I can think of, the closest I can think of, was David Dewhurst, who was, of course, very, very wealthy. And he ran for a lower office, land commissioner, much lower down the ballot. Here's Aaron Reitz, a guy who's pretty young, a lot of experience, a Marine, obviously a UT Law grad, and then went to Attorney General Paxton's office. Went to be chief of staff to Senator Cruz, and then into Donald Trump DOJ, leading the policy at a very high level. So all consequential roles, leadership roles in law and government, and obviously the conservative credentials. Excuse me. But here's a fella who jumps up and says, I'm going to seek election to the third highest office in the state. It's governor, it's lieutenant governor, and it's attorney general. It just really doesn't happen. Think of the other three candidates. You have a U.S. congressman, and you have two Texas state senators, one of whom had been a judge and a prosecutor for a long time. So all three of them have large constituencies, meaning they're in elected office currently. You know, interestingly, the two state senators have a larger constituency than the congressman. That's how big and important our state senate is. We have 31 state senators in Texas, and I think we have 38 congressmen, House seats, U.S. House members. So the Senate districts are larger. And here's Aaron Reitz, who on a dollar-for-dollar basis out-fundraised all of them. Really fascinating to me. And as you know, I raised that as one of the, early on the show, I was so struck by it because certainly at least two of the other three candidates have more in their campaign, one of whom is independently wealthy, multi-generational family money and contributed quite a bit to his own campaign. The other one, I believe, got $1 million loan, if I'm remembering correctly, and then also transferred from his congressional. So we're gonna have many of the four candidates on the show, if not all four of the candidates on the show, and we're going to talk to them all and hear about it all and what they want to do for Texas and why they think they're the best position to be Attorney General. But I got to say, it's such an unusual event to have Aaron Reitz as a serious contender for a statewide office, and not just any statewide office, rather high-ranking, top three statewide office. Anybody running for the top five would be pretty surprising if they hadn't been elected before, if they weren't independently wealthy. As he stated, he'll be the only one with military experience, which just shocks me and to some extent really hurts my heart that we are electing statewide officers here in Texas to lead us, and they have no military experience among them. It troubles me deeply, actually, to hear about it. We heard what he wants to do with the office. He wants to use the force of law to ensure that we have fair and honest elections. Hallelujah, we all want that. He wants to use the force of law to combat the Islamification of Texas, which more and more you and I and others in our circles are hearing about this and becoming very concerned about it. I am particularly concerned about it because when people come here and don't come here desiring to engage in our shared values, our shared language, our shared social norms, it gives me great pause individually when anybody comes here. When there's so much violence, frankly, and just non-integration of thought and values with radical Muslims who are now anchoring in the U.S., raising their flags, wanting women to wear headscarves and burqas and look down and not have rights. Such a conflict with our values and with the values of Texas that it gives me tremendous pause. And I think we have to push back really, really aggressively on the Islamification, certainly the radical Muslims coming to America and specifically targeting Texas. We talked in the past on this show about the solicitation videos in all of the different languages effectively have been translated. Move here, you're safe, you're going to be protected, you can get a piece of the dream, and you can live just like you were in your old country in Pakistan, or just like you were in Iraq or in Iran, but be here in America and enjoy the fruits of their labor. That's really problematic, right? Because our children won't see the fruits of that labor if the Muslim faith that is advocating violence and subjugation of women and rejection of our values is going to take root here on the 250th anniversary of the greatest democracy ever known to man. In the history of recorded history, frankly, this is the most free, the most safe, and the most beautiful nation. Our capitalism and our system of life and values and government has uplifted more people out of poverty in 250 years than ever in 1,000 years of world history. And not just here in the U.S., around the world. We are exporting these values. So I've got to ask, why are we importing radical Islamic values and radical values of other nations who are advanced by people who want to come here to change our values, not honor them. So that's where I break off from immigration as a whole. Aaron Reitz, it was fascinating to hear what he had to say, fascinating to hear what he wants to do with the office. And, as a political observer, I was pretty struck how much money the guy raised. So it's a competitive field. We'll see what happens. We also have to talk about some other things, and this leads us into what we were talking about a moment ago, Iran. So Iran has been one of the great axis of evil my entire life, frankly. Since I was about 7 years old, they threw out the Shah, they had an uprising, and radical Islamists took over. As I said in the program, I remember distinctly in when I was a child, so it was like 1978, 1979, and we didn't light the Christmas tree on the White House lawn. And at the time, there were 3 stations, ABC, NBC, and CBS, so we all watched the news. It was kind of a rite of passage, that 30-minute to 1 hour shot of news that you got between 5 and 6. And every day they would say, this is okay, day 287 of the hostages, and they show photos of blindfolded Americans when our embassy was overrun by Iran. And not lighting the Christmas tree as a kid who was 6, 7 years old, it really has stuck with me. So as I stand here and talk to you at 53, my entire life, Iran has burnt the American flag, chanted in the streets, death to America, down with the infidels. For almost 50 years, they've been trying to kill us. And I've got to say, the bravery of the people who marched in the streets, hundreds of thousands of people. The Iranian government shut off the internet. President Trump boldly came out and said, you better not kill them. You will pay if you kill them. We're now seeing reports of more than 3,500 dead, 24,000 arrested and held. I believe that a nation's word counts for a lot. I believe Donald Trump intends to keep his word, and I pray that Donald Trump keeps his word, because they slaughtered, the axis of evil, the government of Iran, led by the Islamists, the radical Islamists, slaughtered at least 3,500 protesters and arrested and likely tortured about 25,000 more. I was really proud of Trump for sending in the strike force and showing Iran, and I don't even remember exactly when it was. It was a joint strike force, Israel and the U.S., and we just obliterated their air defenses and took out some really evil people. I believe Trump showed them, we can get you anytime, anywhere, period. And then he went out and made a statement that almost certainly empowered and emboldened the protesters. The radical Muslim clerics came out, cracked down, killed at least 3,500 of them, slaughtered them straight up in the streets, arrested tens of thousands more, no doubt, are just terrorizing them and torturing them. And the world's mostly watching. Minneapolis, the radical liberals are out there protesting to defend the crooks, right? Defend the African crooks who are stealing from the system. Why aren't they marching in the streets for the brave Iranians who are marching in their streets for democracy and opportunity and hope? It's conspicuous that the liberals, the radical liberals in America, want to stand up for the worst actors and then ignore those being slaughtered in the streets. The audacity of these radical liberals to be outraged over us going and grabbing Maduro out of Venezuela. A year ago, they would have been protesting in the streets against the abuse of Maduro. But if Trump actually goes and nabs him, then it's a great travesty. The hypocrisy of the left is shocking. But nothing that we're talking about touches the bravery of the people marching in the streets facing death. That's what our forefathers did. The founding fathers of this nation 250 years ago had the courage to tell the greatest power on earth, take this and shove it straight up. We're not going to pay your taxes. We're not going to be your subjects. We are emancipating ourselves out of bravery and defiance. And they were sure they were going to die. There's no way around it. Everybody who faced the British at the time, particularly a little tiny country like ours, just a fledgling group of colonies. We got really lucky, probably had some help from above, and fought for freedom and the dignity of the individual to self-govern. And we were lucky. And look what they gave us. 250 years later, the most beautiful gift that we could give humanity, an example of freedom, of opportunity, of democracy, of liberty, of self-governance. These things we take for granted. And I'm really impressed by the tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people in Iran trying to achieve that for themselves. So I got to say, Mr. President, take an F-15 in there and do what you need to do. Give those folks hope. Give them an opportunity. Let them go and self-rule and see if they can't do what our forefathers bravely did 250 years ago. Go reset that government. Go reset for opportunity. This is Anthony Holm, host of Politics with the Big Dogs. Make sure you're following us. Go to politicswiththebigdogs.com. Sign up for our newsletter. Follow us on Instagram. Follow us on Facebook. Get engaged. We're not trying to speak at you. We want to work with you. The goal of this show is to educate and motivate, mobilize action, because together, all of you listening, all of us working together, we can affect change. 1% of this state can change all the laws if we speak in unison. 1% is 300,000 people. If 300,000 people are telling those 150 House members and those 31 senators, we want to ban taxpayer-funded lobbying, guess what, folks? They're going to ban it. Heck, if 1/2 of 1%, if 150,000 people are speaking with a single voice of the Texas legislature, we'll get property tax relief, period. Not the pretend relief, real relief. We'll pass a ban to a law to ban taxpayer-funded lobbying. We will defeat the forces of evil trying to free foreign truck drivers who can't read English, speak English, or driving on foreign CDLs from getting away with crimes and terrible injuries to our society and helping them in the courts. Because that's what the Texas legislature tried to do last session, and a number of you joined us and we stepped in and we were able to stop it. But those forces of evil are still out there. They're trying to take our rights. They're trying to strip us of the right to elect our judges, the referees of the law, the folks, frankly, the only group in our state who can stop government in their tracks are the judges. We're seeing how powerful these judges are as the liberals try to unwind and undo everything President Trump is doing. Where is he winning? The judiciary, the U.S. Supreme Court, upholding the maps, right? Our new congressional maps. Judges are essential. And you heard Aaron Reitz talk an awful lot about that, how essential these battles were in the courts. Well, guess what? The forces of evil in Austin are trying to strip us of our right to elect our judges. They want to move to appointed model so they get to appoint them. And those judges are beholden to them, not to you, not to me. They want judges that don't ever have to face you and me in the elections. And they did it. They've already begun. 4 years ago, we very foolishly, in my opinion, allowed ourselves to surrender our right to elect some of our judges. They're now this appointed hybrid model. And that is concentrating so much power in the executive branch and in the legislative branch. I got to ask, what are we doing? We are the branch. We are the branch of the people, and we want to have the power to pull the rug out from a bad judge and send them home. And if we speak together with one voice, we'll have the power to do just about anything we need to protect ourselves and our family and ensure the laws of Texas allow people like the next Attorney General to actually enforce and prosecute election crimes. They'll allow people like the next Attorney General to actually prosecute adults who are telling 6-year-old children, you're really not a boy, you're a little girl. You know, the monsters only want the boys, the girls are safe. And in my opinion, that's child abuse. And it turns out the Attorney General of Texas didn't have the power to stop it. Attorney General of Texas was stripped of their right to prosecute known election fraud. I mean, that's just shocking. How does this end? How does this nonsense end? How do we get to lower property taxes? Not this pie-in-the-sky statements by our elected officials. We all work together with one voice. I'll take 0.5% of Texas, and we can accomplish it all. Because if 150,000 people are telling the legislature we want this done, it will get done, period. So I have seen some fascinating things. I encourage you guys, if you see something like this, write in. Let's get you on the air and talk about it, or at least tell me what you want to discuss. Because as we move into this primary season, it's shocking some of the things that have been sent to me. One of which is there's a fellow in San Antonio running for state house who's running a commercial, and he has Donald Trump in it and Greg Abbott in it. He's saying, hey, we're all going to work together if you elect me. Okay, that sounds well and good, but here's what's fascinating about it, almost laughable. Both Donald Trump, President Donald Trump, and Governor Greg Abbott have endorsed this fellow's opponent. So there's two people in a Republican primary for state legislature in San Antonio, and President Trump and Greg Abbott have both endorsed one of them. And the other fella is running commercials with both Abbott and Trump in it, saying, hey, I'm the conservative. You should be with me. I'll go advance their agenda. So I got to ask you, listener, what do you think? I mean, is this a lie? Is this fraud? Is this a mischaracterization on this level of deceit? From my perspective, I'm like, well, wait a second. If they both endorse this guy, person A, then they're opposed to person B. You know, they looked at them both, they made a choice. So wait a second, they're actually opposed to your candidacy, yet you're running a commercial to the voters saying all three of you are basically in lockstep. Is that a lie? And frankly, I think this is really common. I think there's a whole bunch of moderate people out there who have no appreciation or affinity for President Trump's agenda or values, who are like, I'm on the Trump bandwagon. Elect me. I'm Trump 2.0. What do you guys think of this, number one? And number two, are you seeing it out there in the world as well? Because I'm struck by what I believe is just straight fraud. If somebody's running for office and has the visuals of these guys in their commercial saying, we're all three together, we're going to go work together, and I'm going to move all these bills, yet those two fellows have endorsed the other guy. Isn't that some type of violation? It's certainly a moral violation, and I think one's integrity. It's just intellectual fraud, if not outright fraud. So I'd like to hear from you. Reach out to us at politicswiththebigdogs.com. Let me know your opinion. Am I off the mark here? What are your thoughts? Do you agree? If Donald Trump's endorsed somebody, should the opponent be running ads of Donald Trump saying, I'm his guy, he's my guy, and we're in lockstep? What do you think? What about Aaron Reitz, who was on here earlier, who brought up Donald Trump a number of times? I don't believe an endorsement's been made there, even though he's praised him. This is now rolling into the execution phase of a primary season, and we're going to see some wild and crazy things. You guys are the eyes and ears. I'd like you to send it in. Sign up for our newsletter and send us content, material, questions, thoughts, things you think we got wrong, things you think we got right, anything that I didn't go through well enough and we need another second pass or a better explanation. We want your feedback. We want your engagement, and let's go affect change. Thank you so much. God bless you, and God bless Texas.
Politics with the Big Dogs with Anthony Holm is supported in part by the First Amendment Alliance Education Fund. Learn more about today's guest and hear other episodes online in our archive. Visit politicswiththebigdogs.com. If you have a question for Anthony Holm, email Anthony at politicswiththebigdogs.com. From deep in the heart of Texas, you've been listening to Politics with the Big Dogs.